You're upon press. Follow this episode. Great excerpts.
Afternoons with Ryan Price on CFAX 1070.
So much emotion still over the residential school story that's playing out here in Canada. And there are many who want more information about these residential schools to be released, records of the children, but also the people who worked at the schools, many of whom might still be around. It's a touchy subject, but my next guest is an activist. She is a First Nations matriarch who is calling on the Royal BC Museum to release the archives and the records that would explain that information and release that information publicly, which would have a lot of ramifications, but also, according to my next guest, would be the just thing to do. I'm just going to hear her out. That conversation is next.
This is Afternoons with Ryan Price on CFAX 1070.
It's a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the program, a Coast Salish and Nuu-chah-nulth matriarch who is seeking residential school records, and in that quest has a meeting with the Royal BC Museum officials coming up pretty soon, and we want to find out more. So welcoming to the show, again, Coast Salish and Nuu-chah-nulth matriarch Xhopakelxhith. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you for inviting me to your show. Introduce myself really briefly. My name is Xhopakelxhith. I'm an indigenous matriarch from the Coast Salish and Nuu-chah-nulth territories. I've been involved in indigenous resistance and advocacy since I was 15. I'm now 44. And I already had a meeting with the CEO and the deputy CEO at the Royal Museum of BC on Tuesday of this week. After I went on Saturday, the previous Saturday, to demand the records be released immediately, and they decided, okay, we're going to have a meeting with this woman. So that's kind of the follow-up, the background.
And so are you getting a sense that these records are being released? It definitely seems like, considering everything that's happening, considering all the news that's coming out there seems to be this moment where it's time to do this. Are you feeling like it's going to happen?
You know, I'm actually really surprised, and I was a little iffy at first because when I showed up for the meeting with my film crew, the security guard was being really rude to all of us and wasn't going to let us in, and I was afraid that was going to set the tone for the meeting, and actually it didn't. What's happening is that they had prepared a document for me saying how they were working with the tribal councils, various, as well as elected chief and council. And in the end, they decided not to give it to me because after I spoke with them at length for about an hour, they had heard my story, and I said, these people do not represent us. We did not know you guys were in negotiations. They do not give us any information. They truly don't represent the people. Made sure that I had a follow-up meeting in place because you could tell that they were shocked at the information that I was giving them. And they seemed very receptive to what I was saying. They had talked about the rematriation of various of our artifacts and our bones. And I said, listen, I want to put it to you guys like this. Right now, you're harboring criminals, rapists and pedophiles and murderers. These are felonies. These people committed mass graves and hiding bodies. Those are felonies too. And I said, a respected institution such as yours worldwide, it would be a great step forward in reconciliation to release the documents to us immediately, not just to chief and councils or amongst other institutions such as yourselves, but to the actual people. And they seemed receptive, but we will see with the follow-up meeting.
Yeah, I guess make these records just public to anybody? Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's the idea. My first priority would be to indigenous nations, and it doesn't matter. There should be no hierarchy involved in that. If you're indigenous and you're a survivor, intergenerational like I am, then you should have first priority, and then after that, the public should know as well. It's important.
And they've seemed receptive, at least to that conversation.
Yes, they did. They seemed actually receptive to that, and this is why I asked for a follow-up meeting, because I wanted to give them a little bit of time to digest what I was saying.
Are you able to elaborate a bit more on what these records would be and what they would show?
Yes. So what I'm looking for is the records that they have. They have the full rosters of the children who attended, where they're from, and which schools they went to. So that's really important because we need to know, the families need to know where their children and babies are buried, right? And now, so the next thing that they have is they have the names of all of the priests and nuns, which schools they worked at, and for how long, and if they're deceased or alive, right?
And what happens with that information once you get it?
Well, it's going to be made public, right? I mean, there's photographs of these people. The people who are still living should be held accountable immediately. And that's what I had told the Royal Museum of BC. We should do this immediately. I said, they had the trials in Germany where 90-year-old Nazis, stood trial.
The Royal BC Museum, they hold these records just as a collection, I guess. They're not necessarily, the originator of the records. So is there any sensitivity there with their ability to release them?
Well, I had there was this conversation, and, this is it. They came from the St. Anne's nuns office, okay? And they said that they were, on loan or keeping a hold of them. And I said, it really doesn't matter because you're hanging on to all of our, stolen items right now, right here. I'm sitting in an expensive pawn shop of indigenous items that were stolen. You guys committed theft, and you're, harboring our things that we've been asking back for, since you guys took them. So they were like, okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense in a way. And I was like, it really does. I mean, it doesn't matter if they belong to St. Anne's nuns. I mean, personally, if you have a sense of justice and what's right, you should just make them available. If you know that they contain, the names and photos and where these people live of actual murderers and rapists, it's mind-boggling to me that they haven't already released this information to the public and to the RCMP.
Well, we'll see where this goes. As my guest, a Coast Salish and Nuu-chah-nulth matriarch, is demanding the release of these records into residential schools. Xhopakelxhith, thank you for your time today, and good luck as you continue this journey.
Thank you very much.
We'll take a break.